You know, the world's top business leaders are facing a totally new reality. It's not about surviving the occasional shock anymore. Nope, it's about navigating a constant state of uncertainty. So, what's their game plan? Today, we're going to break down the playbook they're using to win in 2026. So, 43%. What's that number all about? Well, that is the percentage of CEOs right here in the United States who say uncertainty is their single biggest economic worry heading into 2026. And this isn't just some vague feeling of anxiety, It's the number one threat they are actively building their strategies around. And this phrase really nails the core shift in thinking. For years, big disruptions were seen as outliers, just temporary bumps in an otherwise stable road. Well, not anymore. Now, leaders see constant volatility as the new normal. It's a fundamental change that demands a completely different mindset. Okay, so to really get a handle on this, here's our roadmap. First, we'll define this age of uncertainty. Then we'll dive into what's actually keeping CEOs up at night. After that, we'll see how they're flipping risk into a genuine opportunity, unpack their new playbook, and finally, check out the modern tools they're using to plan for the unplannable. All right, let's dig in. This whole age of uncertainty thing, it's not just a buzzword. For today's business leaders, navigating this persistent new reality has become their number one strategic challenge. And the data? Well, the data really tells the story. You can see that while almost a third of global CEOs see uncertainty as a top threat, that number shoots up to 43% for CEOs in the US. So yeah, it's a global issue, but it's being felt with some serious intensity in the American market. And here's the crucial point. Companies are moving away from that passive, let's wait and see approach. Instead, they're actively pouring money into contingency planning, stress testing their strategies, and building resilience right into the DNA of their businesses. It's not about weathering a storm anymore. It's about learning to sail in permanently choppy waters. Okay, so we know leaders are worried about uncertainty, but what does that really mean? Let's get specific. Let's map out the actual threats causing all this anxiety. This table from the CEO World Boardroom Risk Index, it's pretty revealing. It shows this incredible range of threats. Number one is that big, general economic uncertainty. But look what's right behind it. Geopolitical, trade wars, a whole mess of tech risks from cybercrime to getting AI right, and then rounding out the top five, climate change. It really is a minefield of interconnected risks. Let's just zoom in on one of these for a second to see how serious this is. Cyber insecurity, which is ranked as the third biggest risk overall. And this is why. A whopping 79% of CEOs say that cyber risk is the main threat to their organization's growth. It makes sense, right? As companies go digital and adopt AI, their vulnerability just skyrockets. This isn't some IT problem tucked away in a back room. It's a fundamental threat to the entire business. So when you're faced with all this, you might think leaders would be hunkering down, right? Playing it safe. But something really fascinating is happening. The smartest companies are making a massive pivot in how they even think about risk itself. The old way of thinking about risk management was that it was a chore, a defensive, box-ticking exercise to keep the regulators happy. The new way? It's all about offense. It's a forward-looking, strategic tool that you can use to find an edge and actually create value. It's a complete 180 on the whole concept. This quote from a company's risk philosophy statement just says it all. The goal isn't just to manage risk anymore. It's to get so good at managing it that it becomes your secret weapon, your competitive advantage. That's the new North Star for corporate strategy. So, how do companies actually do this? How do you go from this cool idea to making it work in the real world? Let's get into the playbook and see how this all gets built into a formal framework. The main framework is called Enterprise Risk Management, or ERM. You can think of it as the operating system for this new way of thinking. It's a holistic approach that weaves risk management into every single part of the organization, making sure strategy, risk, and day-to-day operations are all speaking the same language. And implementing ERM, well, it follows a pretty clear logic. You start by building a core team and getting everyone on the same page with a common language for risk. And you absolutely have to have the CEO's backing for it to work. From there, you figure out where you are now, build the new skills and tech you need, and then you lock it all in with a continuous cycle of monitoring and improving. So, inside this ERM framework, companies are using some really powerful forward-looking techniques.
This is the modern toolkit for dealing with that deep uncertainty we've been talking about.
I love this quote from Eisenhower because it just perfectly captures the philosophy. In a world that's always changing, a rigid, static plan is basically useless the second it's printed. But the process of planning, of thinking through all the possibilities, that is absolutely invaluable. And that's exactly where scenario planning comes in. The goal isn't to predict the one right future. It's to map out several plausible futures. What if a trade war gets worse? What if a new technology pops up? What if a recession hits? And then figure out how you'd respond to each one. It's like building organizational muscles so you can react quickly and effectively no matter what happens. Another tool they use is value at risk, or VAR. This is a numbers-based approach that answers a deceptively simple question. What's the most we can stand to lose? For example, a company might figure out that with 95% confidence, its maximum loss on a portfolio won't be more than, say, $10 million in one day. This helps leaders put a hard number on their downside so they can set clear limits. And then there's this really powerful tool called real options analysis. Now, I know this diagram looks a little complex, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It calculates the financial value of flexibility. So imagine you're deciding whether to build a new factory. This analysis helps you put an actual dollar value on the option to delay the project, or the option to expand it later if sales are great, or even the option to just abandon it if things go south. It turns those big strategic choices into quantifiable assets. So, to wrap it all up, the entire strategic shift is basically this. Companies are ditching their rearview mirror, which only lets them look at past mistakes, and they're installing a forward-looking GPS, one that's designed to help them navigate the uncertainty that lies ahead. And that leaves us with one last provocative thought. In a world that is defined by constant change and disruption, playing it safe and just sticking with what you know might seem like the smart move. But in a world that's always evolving, maybe the biggest risk of all is not taking one.